Caroline stood in the doorway of the lawyer's office, her 7-month pregnant belly pressing against her worn maternity dress. Across the mahogany table sat James Montgomery, the billionaire rancher who had whispered, "I love you," while making love to her in the darkness of his stable. The same man who now refused to even look at her. His lawyer slid papers across the table. "Miss Brooks, Mr. Montgomery is prepared to offer you $50,000 in exchange for your silence and your agreement that he is not the father of your child." Caroline's hands trembled as she touched her belly, feeling her daughter kick. James finally spoke, his voice ice cold. "I have a reputation to protect. I will not be associated with someone like you. People would never understand. They would never accept it. You need to take the money and disappear. Someone like you." Those 3 words contained everything: her weight, her class, her unworthiness in his eyes. If you believe that love should be stronger than shame, that every woman deserves to be claimed and celebrated regardless of her size, and that truth always finds its way to light, hit that like button and follow this channel. This is a story about a woman who refused to stay hidden. Now let me take you back 6 months to a spring morning in Sweetgrass County, Montana, where Caroline Brooks was invisible to everyone except the man who would break her heart while claiming to love her. Caroline Brooks had been invisible her entire life. At 38 years old, she had perfected the art of taking up as little space as possible, keeping her head down, her voice quiet, her body apologetic. She arrived at Montgomery Ranch every morning at 5:30, when the Montana sky was still dark and no one was around to see her. She was a plus-size woman in a world that worshipped the lean and the lovely, and she had learned that invisibility was safer than visibility. Her body was soft and round, thick thighs, full breasts, a belly that curved outward, arms that were strong from lifting hay bales but jiggled when she moved. She kept her dark hair in a simple ponytail, wore no makeup, and dressed in oversized work shirts that hid as much as possible. For 3 years, she had cleaned stables, groomed thoroughbred horses, and mucked stalls at the most prestigious ranch in Montana, and almost no one knew her name. Caroline's life had always been small and quiet. She'd grown up poor, the daughter of a single mother who cleaned houses and drank too much. She'd never been to college, never traveled beyond Montana, never been in love, not really. She'd had 2 brief relationships in her 20s, both with men who seemed embarrassed to be seen with her in public, who made love to her with the lights off and never introduced her to their friends. She'd learned early that women who looked like her didn't get fairy tale romances. They got secret encounters and apologetic explanations, and men who said, "You're beautiful," but never, "You're mine." So she'd stopped hoping for more. She poured all her love into the horses, animals who didn't care about her size, who nuzzled her hands and nickered softly when she entered their stalls. The horses saw her. The horses loved her. That was enough. It had to be enough, because hoping for human love only led to heartbreak. James Montgomery was everything Caroline was not: wealthy, powerful, effortlessly attractive. At 45, he was tall and distinguished with silver threading through his dark hair, the kind of man who looked like he belonged on magazine covers. He'd inherited Montgomery Ranch and a fortune estimated at $3 billion. He bred championship racehorses, traveled the world, and socialized with politicians and celebrities. His circle consisted of model-thin women with trust funds, men who summered in the Hamptons, people who said things like, "We're skiing in Gstad this year." Caroline had seen James exactly 9 times in 3 years, always from a distance, always surrounded by beautiful people who lived in a world she could never access. He'd never spoken to her directly. She assumed he didn't even know she existed. She was just part of the landscape, like the fences or the feed bins, necessary but unremarkable, functional but forgettable. The first microaggression happened on a bright April morning. Caroline was in the main stable, brushing down Midnight James's prize stallion, when she heard voices approaching. James and 3 of his friends, men in expensive casual wear, their watches worth more than Caroline's annual salary. "So the charity gala is next month," one of them was saying. "You bringing anyone, James?" There was laughter, the kind of knowing laughter that made Caroline's stomach tighten. "Come on, Montgomery, you can't stay single forever. What about Victoria Hartfield?" "She's gorgeous. She's from the right family." James's voice was smooth, deflecting. "I'm focused on the horses right now." They rounded the corner and saw Caroline. The conversation stopped abruptly. One of the men looked her up and down with barely concealed disdain. "Christ, James, where do you find your staff?" Another laughed. "Maybe she's here to eat the horses, not groom them." Caroline's face burned. She kept brushing midnight, her hands mechanical, her eyes down. She waited for James to say something, anything, but he just chuckled, a weak, uncomfortable sound, and said, "Come on, let's check on Thunder." They walked away, their laughter echoing. Caroline stood very still, fighting tears, hating herself for caring what cruel men thought of her. But the comments escalated. The ranch manager, a hard man named Derek, started making pointed remarks. "Caroline, maybe lay off the donuts. You're moving slower than usual." Brett, a college kid working summer help, would oink softly when she walked past. One of James's regular female visitors, a skeletal blonde named Veronica, had actually touched Caroline's arm and said, with poisonous sweetness, "You know, there are wonderful weight loss programs now. I could give you some recommendations. I just think you'd be so much prettier if you lost some weight." Each comment was a small cut, a reminder that her body was wrong, unacceptable, something to be fixed or hidden. Caroline absorbed them silently because what choice did she have? She needed this job. She was good at it, and she'd spent her whole life learning how to endure cruelty without breaking, or so she thought. Then came the garden party, the worst humiliation of her life, delivered in front of 200 people. It was late May, and Montgomery Ranch was hosting a charity polo match and outdoor gala. Caroline had been explicitly told to stay in the back stable blocks, out of sight of the guests. But one of the mares, Starlight, went into distress, a potential colic situation that could be fatal if not handled immediately. Caroline had no choice but to walk the mare in circles in the main paddock, the only space large enough right in view of the garden party. She was in her work clothes, stained jeans, a t-shirt stretched tight across her curves, her hair escaping its ponytail. She felt every eye land on her like a physical weight. Then she heard it. "Oh my God, is that one of the staff?" A woman's voice, loud and incredulous. "She's enormous!" Laughter rippled through the crowd. James Montgomery must be desperate for help. "Can you imagine letting someone who looks like that represent your ranch?" "I'd be mortified." "Adut." The comments came from everywhere, a chorus of disgust and mockery. Caroline kept walking Starlight, her vision blurring with tears she refused to shed in public. Her whole body felt like it was on fire with shame. She was acutely aware of every inch of herself, her thick thighs rubbing together, her belly bouncing slightly with each step, her arms jiggling, sweat darkening the underarms of her shirt. She felt monstrous, grotesque, wrong, and then she saw James. He was standing at the edge of the crowd with a group of impeccably dressed people, a champagne flute in his hand. He was looking directly at her. Their eyes met for just a moment, and Caroline saw something flicker in his expression. Was it pity? Embarrassment? But then a stunning woman in a white sundress touched his arm, said something that made the group laugh, and James turned away. He turned his back on her completely, as if she didn't exist. That was the moment something inside Caroline broke, not dramatically, just a quiet internal fracture, the final crack in a foundation that had been weakening for years. She finished caring for Starlight, then drove home in a fog of shame so thick she couldn't remember the route. Her emotional response was to shut down completely. She stopped eating. She stopped sleeping. She moved through her days like a ghost, arriving at work in the dark and leaving in the dark, speaking to no one, making eye contact with no one. At night, she lay in her small rented house and stared at the ceiling, replaying every cruel comment, every dismissive look, every moment of humiliation. She thought about quitting, but where would she go? This was the only job she was good at, the only thing she knew how to do. She thought about disappearing entirely, just driving away from Montana and never coming back, starting over somewhere no one knew her, but she was too tired, too defeated, too broken, so she just continued existing, a hollow version of herself, going through the motions of a life that felt increasingly unbearable. She avoided mirrors because she couldn't stand to see what others saw, a body that was wrong, unacceptable, worthy of mockery. But late at night, in the quiet darkness of her bedroom, a memory would surface. Caroline was 7 years old, sitting on her mother's lap, despite being too big for it. Other kids at school had been cruel that day, calling her fat and gross. Her mother had held her tight and said, "Caroline Marie Brooks, you listen to me. There is nothing wrong with your body, not one single thing. Your body is strong and beautiful and perfect exactly as it is. The people who say otherwise, they're small inside. They're trying to make you small too because small people are easier to control. But you're not made for small, baby. You're made for big love and big life and taking up all the space you need." Her mother had been wrong about so many things. She'd been an alcoholic, a poor judge of men, irresponsible with money. But maybe she'd been right about that. Maybe Caroline had been slowly shrinking herself for years, trying to take up less space, be less offensive, be less of everything. Maybe it was time to stop shrinking. The point of decision came on a Tuesday evening in early June. Caroline was finishing up for the day, exhausted and empty, when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, expecting Derek or one of the other hands. Instead, she found herself face to face with James Montgomery. He was alone, which was unusual. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read, something between nervousness and determination. "Caroline," he said, "can I talk to you for a minute?" Her heart started pounding. This was it. He was going to fire her. Tell her that her presence was bad for the ranch's image, that they needed someone more presentable. She braced herself for the blow. But instead, James said something that would change everything. "I need to apologize to you. I've been a coward and I'm ashamed of myself. You deserve better. You deserve so much better." And then, impossibly, he stepped closer, his eyes intense and sincere. "The truth is, Caroline, I can't stop thinking about you." The spark, the thing that planted the seed of hope and rebellion, was that moment when James reached out and gently touched her face. "You're beautiful," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You're so goddamn beautiful, and I've been too afraid to admit it. Afraid of what people would think, afraid of what it would mean. But I can't keep pretending I don't see you, that I don't want you." Caroline's world tilted on its axis. This couldn't be real. Men like James Montgomery didn't want women like her. They didn't call them beautiful. They didn't look at them with hunger and tenderness. But he was kissing her now, his hands in her hair, his body pressed against hers, and it felt real. It felt more real than anything in her entire life. "I know this is complicated," James whispered against her mouth. "I know there will be challenges, but I don't care anymore. I want you, Caroline. I want to be with you. Will you give me a chance?" She should have been cautious. She should have asked questions, but she'd been starving for love her entire life. And here it was, offered by the most unlikely person. How could she possibly say no? The affair began that night in the stable office, James's hands desperate on her body, his mouth claiming hers like he was drowning and she was air. Caroline had been with men before, but never like this. James touched her like she was precious, like every curve and soft place was exactly what he wanted. He traced the line of her hip, the fullness of her thighs, the roundness of her belly, and said, "Perfect," like he meant it. They made love on the old leather couch, and afterward James held her close and said, "I've wanted this for so long, wanted you for so long. I just didn't have the courage to admit it." Caroline felt like she was living in a dream, a beautiful, impossible dream where she was desired and cherished. For the first time in her life, she felt beautiful, not despite her body, but because of it, with it, through it. James made her feel like her softness was a gift rather than a flaw. It was intoxicating. It was everything she'd ever wanted. And she ignored the small voice in her head that whispered, "If he really wants you, why are you still in the stable instead of his house?" But the relationship quickly established patterns that made Caroline's stomach twist with unease. James only came to her after dark, when the ranch was empty. He never invited her to his house. When they were together, he was passionate and attentive, saying all the right things about how beautiful she was, how much he cared for her. But in the daylight, when other people were around, James barely acknowledged her existence. He'd walk past her in the stable without a word, or speak to her in the same impersonal tone he used with all the staff. Once, Caroline tried to touch his hand when they were alone in the tack room, and James had jerked away, his eyes darting toward the door. "Someone might see," he'd hissed. "We have to be careful." Careful, that word began to haunt her. Why did they have to be careful? If James cared about her, why was he so terrified of anyone knowing? But she pushed the doubts away, because when they were alone, everything felt real and true and right. The first phase of research came when Caroline started noticing changes in how James talked about her body. At first, he'd been effusive in his praise. "I love your curves. You're perfect just as you are. I love how soft you are." But after a few weeks, subtle comments started creeping in. "You'd look amazing in this dress I saw. It's really slimming. Have you ever thought about joining a gym? We could work out together. Maybe we should skip dessert tonight. I'm trying to eat healthier." Each comment was couched in concern or framed as being about him, but Caroline heard the subtext. "You'd be more acceptable if you were smaller." She started to realize that while James desired her body in private, he was already imagining how he could change it for public consumption. The realization made her feel sick, but she told herself she was being paranoid, oversensitive. James loved her. He said so. That had to be enough. Her first small act of defiance was refusing to hide her relationship anymore, at least not to herself. She started keeping a journal, writing down everything James said to her, every promise he made, every "I love you" he whispered in the dark. She documented their relationship because some part of her knew she would need proof later. Proof that it had been real. Proof that she hadn't imagined it. She also started taking better care of herself, not to be smaller, but to feel more powerful. She bought new clothes that actually fit her properly instead of hiding her body. She wore lipstick. She styled her hair, not for James, but for herself. Because if someone as powerful as James Montgomery could want her, maybe she'd been wrong about her worth all along. Maybe she was beautiful. Maybe she deserved to be seen. She started holding her head higher at work, making eye contact, speaking up. People noticed the change, whispered about it, but she didn't care anymore. An unexpected ally appeared in the form of Martha Chen, the ranch veterinarian. Martha was in her 50s, a no-nonsense woman who'd been around ranches and wealthy men her entire career. She pulled Caroline aside one morning after noticing the hickey on Caroline's neck that she hadn't quite managed to hide. "You're sleeping with him," Martha said flatly. Caroline tried to deny it, but Martha just shook her head. "I've seen this movie before, honey. Rich man, working class woman, secret affair. Let me guess, he's told you how beautiful you are, how special, how different from other women, but he hasn't taken you anywhere public. He hasn't introduced you to his friends or family, and he probably never will." Caroline bristled. "You don't know him. It's more complicated than that." Martha's expression was sad and knowing. "It always is. But ask yourself this. If he really loves you, why does he need to hide you? Why does your relationship only exist in the dark?" The antagonist struck again, but this time it wasn't with mockery. It was with an invitation. James came to Caroline one evening looking nervous and excited. "I've been thinking," he said. "I want to take our relationship to the next level. I want you to come to my house for dinner. Just the two of us. No more sneaking around in stables. I want to treat you right." Caroline's heart soared. This was it, the moment she'd been waiting for. James was ready to claim her, to make their relationship real. She dressed carefully that Saturday evening, choosing her best outfit, taking time with her hair and makeup. She drove to his main house feeling like Cinderella going to the ball. But when she arrived, James immediately pulled her inside, looking around nervously. "Did anyone see you come here?" he asked. The house was beautiful, all exposed beams and leather furniture and expensive art. But James seemed agitated, unable to relax. Over dinner, Caroline tried to enjoy the moment, but something felt wrong. Finally, she asked the question that had been building for weeks. "James, when are you going to tell people about us?" He froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. "Tell people?" "Yes, your friends, your family, the staff. When are you going to tell them we're together?" James set down his fork carefully. "Caroline, you have to understand, my world is complicated. There are expectations. My social circle they're judgmental, conservative. They wouldn't understand us." "Understand what exactly?" Caroline's voice was steady, but her heart was pounding. "What is there to understand? Either you care about me or you don't. Either you want to be with me or you don't." James reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I do care about you. I'm crazy about you, but I need time. I need to figure out how to present this in a way that makes me acceptable," Caroline finished. The truth was laid bare between them. "You're ashamed of me. You're ashamed to be seen with me." "That's not true!" James's voice rose, defensive. Look, Caroline, you have to admit that we come from very different worlds. My friends, my business associates, they expect me to be with a certain kind of woman. And you..." He trailed off, but the implication hung in the air like poison. "A certain kind of woman. Thin, wealthy, appropriate." "Say it," Caroline said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Say what you really mean. You're embarrassed to be seen with a fat woman. You like fucking me in private, but you'd be mortified to introduce me to your mother." James's face went pale. "Don't put words in my mouth. It's not about your weight." "Yes, it is. It's entirely about my weight. If I looked like those women you hang around with, we'd be at restaurants right now. We'd be going to parties. You'd have already introduced me to your family. But because I'm fat, I'm your dirty little secret." James stood up, angry now. "You're being unfair. I told you from the beginning that my world is complicated. I need time to prepare people, to help them understand." "Understand what, James?" Caroline stood too, her voice breaking. "That fat women deserve love? That we're human beings worthy of respect? What exactly do you need to prepare people for?" The fight escalated into something raw and painful. James tried to backtrack, claiming he was protecting her from his cruel social circle, that he was trying to shield her from judgment. But Caroline saw through it now. "You're not protecting me," she said. "You're protecting yourself. You're protecting your reputation. You want the comfort and the sex and the ego boost of having someone worship you, but you don't want the social consequences of actually being with me in public." James's face hardened. "That's not fair. I have a business to run, a legacy to maintain. I can't just what? Just be seen with a fat woman. Just admit that you have feelings for someone who doesn't look like a model. Just choose love over what people think." Caroline grabbed her purse, tears streaming down her face now. "I deserve better than this. I deserve someone who's proud to be with me, not ashamed. And you know what the worst part is? I actually believed you when you said I was beautiful. I actually thought maybe I'd been wrong my whole life. Maybe I was worthy of love. But I wasn't wrong. You just wanted to feel like a good person for fucking the fat girl." She drove home sobbing so hard she could barely see the road. But underneath the heartbreak, a different emotion was building. Rage. Pure, cleansing rage. How dare he? How dare he make her believe she was beautiful and then hide her away like something shameful? How dare he whisper, "I love you," and then refuse to claim her in the light? Caroline had spent her whole life accepting that she was less than, unworthy, too much and not enough all at once. But James had given her a taste of being desired, being cherished, and now she knew what she'd been missing. And she was done accepting crumbs. She was done being anyone's secret. She was done apologizing for her existence. The rage burned through her shame, cauterized her self-doubt, and left behind something hard and unyielding: determination. James Montgomery would learn that you couldn't treat people as disposable and expect no consequences. The flashback that surfaced that night was devastating. Caroline was 16, at junior prom, and she'd been asked to dance by Tyler Henderson, a popular, handsome boy who'd never spoken to her before. She'd been so excited, so hopeful. They'd danced to 3 songs, and Tyler had been sweet and charming. Then, when the dance ended, his friends had erupted in laughter. "I can't believe you actually did it," one of them shouted. "Did she break your arms when you held her?" Tyler had laughed along with them. "Dude, I think I pulled a muscle trying to get my arms around her." Caroline had run from the gym, humiliated beyond words. She'd skipped the rest of junior year events, graduating quietly and never looking back. For years, she'd told herself that was just kids being cruel, that adults were different. But James had proven that cruelty doesn't age out, it just gets more sophisticated. Men still wanted to enjoy her body in secret while being embarrassed by it in public. The pattern was the same, only this time, Caroline wasn't 16 and powerless. This time, she could fight back. Martha checked on her the next day, finding Caroline red-eyed but resolute. "He ended it?" Martha guessed. "Not exactly," Caroline said. "But I realized he's never going to choose me publicly. He's going to keep me hidden forever, making excuses about complicated situations and protecting me." Martha sighed. "I'm sorry, honey, I really am. Men like that, they're cowards." Then Martha shared her own story. 20 years ago, I had an affair with a married surgeon. He said he was going to leave his wife for me. He said I was the love of his life, but he kept making excuses. The kids needed time to adjust. His wife was fragile. His career would suffer. 2 years I waited, and then I ran into them at a restaurant, him and his wife, and he looked right through me like I was invisible. That's when I realized I was never the love of his life. I was a fantasy, a escape, but when real life showed up, I was disposable. She gripped Caroline's hand. "Don't be disposable. Make him face what he did. Make him accountable." Caroline began to notice that she wasn't alone in her experience. She started paying attention to other women at the ranch, in town, in her community. There was Rosa, the cook at a neighboring ranch, who told her once about a brief relationship with her boss that ended when his family came to visit. There was Linda at the feed store, who dated a wealthy man for months before discovering he'd been engaged to someone else the whole time. There was a whole underground network of working-class women who'd been romanced and discarded by rich men who wanted their bodies but not their presence in their real lives. Caroline wasn't an anomaly. She was part of a pattern, and patterns could be disrupted. She started talking to these women, gathering their stories, their advice, their rage. A community of discarded women who understood exactly what she was going through. They helped her see that this wasn't about her worth. It was about James's cowardice and the toxic culture that made men think they could treat women this way. She practiced her voice by confronting the smaller injustices first. When Derek made another comment about her weight, she looked him dead in the eye and said, "Derek, the next time you comment on my body, I'm filing a formal complaint for workplace harassment, and we both know James won't protect you." Derek's mouth fell open in shock, but he never commented again. When Brett, the college kid, made a pig noise as she walked past, Caroline turned around, walked back to him, and said in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "Brett, you seem really obsessed with my body. It's concerning. If you can't keep your fixation to yourself, I'm going to have to report it as sexual harassment." Brett went pale and stammered an apology. The other ranch hands looked at her with new respect and a little fear. Good, let them be afraid. She was done being the one who was afraid. James tried to reach out multiple times. Text messages, "Can we talk? I miss you. I'm sorry about the other night. I didn't mean to hurt you. You're being unreasonable. I need time. Why can't you understand that?" Caroline ignored them all. She had nothing to say to him. But then, 2 weeks after their fight, James showed up at her house late at night, drunk and emotional. "Caroline, please," he said through her locked front door. "I need you. I can't stop thinking about you. I love you. Why can't that be enough?" She opened the door and looked at him, this powerful, handsome, wealthy man reduced to begging on her doorstep. She felt nothing, no sympathy, no rekindled desire, nothing. "Love without respect isn't love," she told him. "Love without courage isn't love. You don't love me, James. You love how I make you feel. There's a difference." He tried to push into her house to kiss her, to seduce her back. But Caroline stood firm. "Go home, and don't come back unless you're ready to claim me in daylight." The confrontation Caroline had been preparing for arrived in the most unexpected way. 3 weeks after their fight, Caroline realized her period was late, very late. She took a pregnancy test in the bathroom of a gas station 20 miles from town, hands shaking so badly she could barely read the result. Positive. She sat in her truck in the parking lot for an hour, her mind spinning. Pregnant. She was pregnant with James Montgomery's baby. The man who was too ashamed to be seen with her in public was the father of her child. The irony was devastating. But underneath the shock and fear, Caroline felt something else. Clarity. This changed everything. This baby deserved a father who was present, who was proud, who didn't hide. And Caroline would make damn sure James understood that. She drove straight to Montgomery Ranch, marched into his office without knocking, and closed the door behind her. James looked up, surprised and pleased. "Caroline, I'm so glad I'm pregnant," she said. "It's yours, and you need to decide right now what kind of man you're going to be." The shock on James's face was almost comical. He went pale, then red, then pale again. "You're pregnant?" "Yes, about 6 weeks along." Caroline sat down, her hands folded in her lap, watching him process. "I'm keeping the baby. That's not up for discussion. What is up for discussion is whether you're going to be part of our lives or not. But I'm done being your secret, James. If you want to be this child's father, you have to be my partner, publicly. No more hiding, no more excuses." James stood up, pacing behind his desk like a caged animal. This is a lot to process. I need time to think." "You have until tomorrow," Caroline said calmly. "Tomorrow at noon, you either introduce me to your staff as your girlfriend and the mother of your child, or you never contact me again. Choose." She stood to leave, and James grabbed her arm. "Caroline, wait, you can't just... There are complications you don't understand. My family, my business partners, my social position..." She pulled her arm free. "I understand perfectly. You're a coward. You care more about what people think than about me or this baby. That's very clear." She walked out, leaving James staring after her. The scene became very public very quickly because word spread like wildfire. Caroline had made sure of that. She'd told Martha first, knowing Martha would tell others. By that evening, everyone on the ranch knew Caroline was pregnant. By the next morning, half the county knew. The whispers followed Caroline everywhere. "Did you hear about the stable girl? James Montgomery got her pregnant. Can you imagine? She probably trapped him on purpose. Poor James. Imagine being tied to someone like that." Caroline held her head high and ignored it all. She showed up at the ranch at exactly noon, as promised, and waited in the main stable. Workers had gathered, pretending to be busy, but obviously waiting to see what would happen. And at 12:05, James appeared. He looked haggard, like he hadn't slept. He looked at Caroline, and she saw the decision in his eyes before he spoke, and it broke what was left of her heart. "Caroline, can we talk privately?" James's voice was quiet, almost gentle. Caroline shook her head. "No. Whatever you have to say, you can say it here, in front of everyone." James's jaw tightened. He glanced around at the gathered workers, at Martha standing with her arms crossed, at Derek smirking in the corner. "Fine," he said. His voice was cold now, the warmth completely gone. "Caroline, I think you should know that I've consulted with my lawyer, and we both agree that there's no proof that this baby is mine. For all I know, you've been involved with multiple people. I'm a wealthy man, and unfortunately that makes me a target for this kind of manipulation. The words hit Caroline like a physical blow. Around them, people gasped. Martha said, "James, you son of a—" But Caroline held up her hand, silencing her. She looked at James, really looked at him, and saw him clearly for the first time. The cowardice, the cruelty, the absolute emptiness where his courage should have been. Caroline spoke her truth, her voice steady and strong despite the pain radiating through her chest. "You're calling me a liar. In front of all these people, you're calling me a liar and saying this baby might not be yours. Even though you absolutely know that I haven't been with anyone else. Even though you told me you loved me. Even though you said I was beautiful and perfect and everything you wanted. You said those things, James. In the dark, in secret, where no one could hear. You said them while you were inside me, while you were holding me, while you were making promises you had no intention of keeping. But now, in the light, in front of witnesses, you're saying, I'm a liar. You're choosing your reputation over your own child. You're choosing what people think over what's true and right and real." Her voice didn't waver. She refused to cry, refused to give him or anyone else the satisfaction of seeing her break. "Let me tell you what's really happening here," Caroline continued. "You're ashamed. Not of what you did. You enjoyed every minute of our time together. You're ashamed of me. You're ashamed that you desire a woman who doesn't fit into your pretty, perfect world. You're ashamed that you fell in love with someone fat, someone poor, someone who your friends would mock. And rather than have the courage to say, I don't care what you think, I love her, rather than be a man, a real man, you're going to pretend none of it happened. You're going to erase me and this baby because we're inconvenient, because we're embarrassing, because loving us publicly would cost you something, and you're not willing to pay that price." People were staring at James now, and his face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. "You're being dramatic," he said. "I'm being practical. I'm not going to claim a child that might not even be mine." "Then we'll do a DNA test," Caroline said calmly. "Right now, today. And when it proves you're the father, what will your excuse be then?" James's expression hardened into something ugly. "Fine, do your DNA test. But even if, and that's a big if, even if it shows I'm the father, that doesn't mean I'm going to be with you, Caroline. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to throw away my entire life, everything I've built, for this. For you," he meant. "For someone like you. I'll provide financial support if legally required," James continued, his voice businesslike now, like they were negotiating a contract. "But I won't be involved otherwise. I can't be. People would never understand. My mother would be devastated. My business associates would lose respect for me. I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings, but it's the reality of my position." Caroline nodded slowly. "So that's your final answer. Money, but no presence. Support, but no love. You'll help raise this child from a distance, with checks but no cuddles, with financial obligation but no actual fatherhood." "That's the best I can offer," James said. "Take it or leave it." Caroline smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "Oh, I'll take it. I'll take the DNA test. I'll take the legal support. And I'll take one more thing, your reputation. Because you're right about one thing. People talk, and they're going to talk about this." The evidence Caroline had been gathering was about to be exposed. From her bag, she pulled out her phone and held it up. "I recorded some of our conversations," she said. "Not all of them, but enough. Enough to prove that we had a relationship. Enough to prove that you said you loved me, that you wanted to be with me. Enough to prove that when you call me a liar now, you're the one who's lying." James's face went white. "You recorded me without my consent? That's illegal." "Actually, Montana is a one-party consent state," Martha interjected. "She's perfectly within her rights." Caroline hit play on one of the recordings. James's voice filled the stable, intimate and emotional. "Caroline, I'm falling in love with you. I know this is complicated, but I don't care. You're everything I've been looking for. You're beautiful and kind and real, and I don't want to hide this anymore. I want everyone to know how I feel about you." The date stamp on the recording was from 3 weeks ago. The James standing in front of them now looked nothing like the man in that recording. Another revelation came from an unexpected source. One of the ranch hands, a quiet guy named Miguel, who'd worked there for years, stepped forward. "Mr. Montgomery," he said, "I need to say something. I've watched you with Caroline over the past few months. We all have. We've seen you sneaking around, meeting her after dark, looking at her like she hung the moon. And we've also seen how you treat her when other people are around, like she's nothing, like she's invisible. It's been hard to watch. And now this?" He shook his head in disgust. "You're not the man I thought you were, sir. You're not the man your father was." Other workers murmured agreement. Even Derek, who'd never been kind to Caroline, looked uncomfortable. "I'm not saying what she did was right," Miguel continued, "but what you're doing is worse. You're abandoning your own child because you're embarrassed about who the mother is. That's low, sir. That's really low." The tide was turning completely. James could feel it. The judgment, the disappointment, the loss of respect. These were his employees, people who'd worked for him for years, and they were looking at him like he was something distasteful. "You don't understand," James said, his voice rising. "None of you understand the pressure I'm under. My family has expectations. My social circle has standards. I can't just what?" Martha interrupted. "Just treat all women with equal dignity? Just take responsibility for your actions? Just be a decent human being?" She stepped closer to James, her voice cutting. "I've been a veterinarian for 30 years. I've worked with wealthy ranchers, billionaires, royalty, and you know what I've learned? Money doesn't make you better than anyone. It just gives you more opportunities to show what kind of person you really are. And you, James Montgomery, have shown us exactly who you are. You're a coward who preys on vulnerable women and then discards them when they become inconvenient." The most devastating moment came when Elena Hartfield walked into the stable. Elena was the grandmother of Victoria Hartfield, the woman James was supposed to marry according to his social circle. Elena was old Montana money, a matriarch whose opinion carried weight in every drawing room from Helena to Billings. She'd apparently heard about the confrontation and driven over immediately. Everyone fell silent as she walked straight up to James. For a moment, Caroline thought Elena was going to defend him, to take his side against the working-class woman who dared to entangle herself with a Montgomery. But instead, Elena looked at James with profound disappointment and said, "Your father would be ashamed of you." James recoiled like she'd slapped him. "Mrs. Hartfield, I can explain." "Don't," Elena said sharply. "I've known your family for 40 years. I knew your father when he was courting your mother. She was a school teacher, did you know that? Working class. Your father's parents were horrified, but he married her anyway because he loved her, because he had integrity, because he understood that character matters more than circumstance." Eleanor turned to Caroline. "Miss Brooks, is it?" Caroline nodded, stunned. "I don't know you well, but I know Martha, and she speaks highly of you. I also know that any woman brave enough to stand up to a Montgomery in his own territory is a woman of considerable strength." She opened her purse and pulled out a business card. "I have a ranch in the next county, smaller than this one, but well run. I lost my daughter 2 years ago. She was a veterinarian, worked with large animals, would have loved meeting someone like you. I've been looking for someone to help manage my stables. The job comes with a house on the property, health insurance, and a salary twice what you're making here. If you're interested, call me." Caroline took the card with trembling hands, unable to speak. Eleanor turned back to James. "As for you, the Hartfield family will be re-evaluating our business relationship with Montgomery Ranch. We don't associate with men who lack honor." She walked out, leaving James standing in ruins. The complete power shift happened in that moment. James had come into this confrontation as the powerful one, the wealthy rancher, the employer, the man who could make or break Caroline's life with a word. But now he stood exposed, diminished, his cruelty and cowardice on full display. His own employees were looking at him with disgust. The Hartfield family, one of his most important social and business connections, had just publicly condemned him. And Caroline, the woman he'd tried to shame into silence, stood tall and strong, a job offer in her hand, support surrounding her. "I'll take the DNA test," James said quietly, all the fight gone out of him. "And I'll do the right thing financially. But Caroline, you have to understand." "I don't have to understand anything," Caroline said. "You had a choice. You could have been brave. You could have loved me loudly and proudly, despite what people might think. You could have been a real father to this baby, a real partner to me, but you chose comfort over courage. You chose reputation over love, and that's something you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life." The consequences began immediately. That evening, Caroline got a call from a lawyer, not James's lawyer, but one hired by Elena Hartfield on her behalf. "Mrs. Hartfield wants to make sure you're protected," the lawyer said. "We're going to make sure the DNA test is done properly, that you get appropriate child support, and that James can't use his money and power to intimidate you." Caroline also got calls from 3 other ranchers in the area, offering her work if she needed it. Apparently, word had spread fast about what happened, and public opinion was firmly on her side. The local newspaper even called asking for an interview, though Caroline declined. She didn't need publicity. She just needed James to face the truth. And 3 days later, the DNA test results came back, 99% probability that James Montgomery was the father. The proof was undeniable. Caroline hand-delivered a copy of the results to James's office, along with a note. "Your daughter deserves better than a father who's ashamed of her. But if shame is all you have to offer, then we're better off without you." Caroline moved to Elena Hartfield's ranch 2 weeks later. The cottage that came with the job was small but charming. 2 bedrooms, a porch overlooking the mountains, a kitchen with actual sunlight. Elena had furnished it simply but comfortably, and when Caroline arrived, there was a note on the table. "Welcome home. Take the time you need to settle in. The horses can wait. You can't." Caroline stood in the middle of her new living room, her hand on her growing belly, and cried for the first time since the confrontation. But these weren't tears of shame or heartbreak. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of release. She'd spent so many years being small, being invisible, accepting crumbs. But this cottage, this job, this new beginning was more than crumbs. It was dignity, it was respect, it was a future, and she'd earned it not by shrinking herself, but by standing tall and demanding to be treated as worthy. New opportunities emerged quickly. Elena introduced Caroline to her wider circle, other ranch owners, horse breeders, veterinarians. Unlike James's crowd, these people judged Caroline on her skill and knowledge, not her appearance. Within a month, Caroline was consulting on horse care for 3 different ranches, earning extra income and building a reputation as an expert. She started taking online courses in equine management, investing in her education, planning for a future where she could own her own small ranch someday. The pregnancy progressed healthily, and Caroline found a wonderful doctor who treated her body with respect, who never once commented on her weight, except to say that she was healthy and strong. For the first time in her life, Caroline felt like she was building something real, not just surviving, but actually thriving. The baby grew inside her, and with each kick, Caroline felt more certain that she'd made the right choice. Her daughter would grow up seeing her mother stand tall and demand respect. That was worth everything. The physical transformation wasn't about weight loss. Caroline was done with that narrative. Instead, it was about confidence and presence. She started dressing in clothes that fit properly, that celebrated her curves rather than hiding them. She wore her hair down sometimes, styled and pretty. She bought maternity clothes that were actually fashionable, deep jewel tones that made her feel regal, soft fabrics that felt good against her skin. When she looked in the mirror now, she didn't see something that needed to be fixed. She saw a strong woman carrying new life, building a new future, refusing to accept anyone's shame. She saw her mother's daughter, made for big love and big life, and taking up all the space she needed. The transformation showed in how she moved through the world, head high, shoulders back, voice steady. People responded to it. They saw her differently because she saw herself differently. Caroline's voice grew in unexpected ways. She started a blog about working in the horse industry as a plus-size woman, sharing both the challenges and the joys. It was small at first, just her thoughts and experiences. But within weeks, she was getting messages from other women, stable hands, trainers, riders, who'd experienced similar discrimination and isolation. "I thought I was the only one," one woman wrote. "Thank you for making me feel less alone." Caroline started writing more intentionally, addressing body image in equestrian culture, workplace harassment, the assumption that only thin women could work with large animals. Her readership grew. A magazine focused on rural women asked to interview her. Slowly, quietly, Caroline was becoming a voice for women who'd been told they were too much and not enough. She'd found her purpose not despite what happened with James, but because of it. Her pain had meaning now. Her story could help others. James, meanwhile, was experiencing his own transformation, though not a positive one. Word of what he'd done spread through Montana's wealthy circles like wildfire. Several business partners distanced themselves. He was quietly asked to step down from the board of a prominent charity. At social events, people were polite but cool, and he'd hear the whispers, "That's the one who got the stable girl pregnant and tried to deny it." Can you imagine treating anyone that way? His poor father would be devastated. Victoria Hartfield, the woman everyone assumed James would marry, publicly ended their friendship, saying in an interview with a Society magazine, "I can't associate with someone who treats women as disposable. Character matters more than pedigree." James tried to repair his reputation, hiring a PR firm, making donations to women's charities. But the damage was done. He'd shown Montana society who he really was, and they judged him and found him wanting. His loneliness was his own creation, and no amount of money could fix it. A small romantic subplot developed, though not with James. Elena's ranch manager, Daniel, was a divorced man in his mid-40s, kind and quiet and competent. He helped Caroline settle in, teaching her the specifics of Elena's operation, always respectful and patient. He treated her pregnancy as a normal condition rather than a problem to be managed. He made her laugh. And one evening, when Caroline was 6 months pregnant and feeling exhausted and huge and unattractive, Daniel had looked at her and said simply, "You're extraordinary. I hope you know that." It wasn't a declaration of love, not yet, but it was the beginning of something. The possibility of a man who would see her fully, claim her proudly, love her honestly. Caroline wasn't ready for that yet, but she tucked the possibility away in her heart, like a seed waiting for spring. Maybe someday she could try again. Maybe not all men were like James. Maybe real love, brave love, honest love was actually possible. Caroline faced a new challenge when James's mother, Patricia Montgomery, showed up at the ranch unannounced. Patricia was exactly what Caroline expected. Elegant, cold, dripping with old money and older prejudices. She'd come to discuss the situation, which meant she'd come to buy Caroline off. "My son made a mistake," Patricia said, sitting ramrod straight in Eleanor's parlor. "But that doesn't mean our family needs to be connected to this situation permanently. I'm prepared to offer you a substantial sum in exchange for your agreement to raise the child without Montgomery involvement or name recognition." Caroline looked at this woman, this mother who'd raised a son too cowardly to love outside his social class, and felt nothing but pity. "Your son didn't make a mistake, Mrs. Montgomery. He made a choice, multiple choices, and now he gets to live with the consequences. My daughter will know who her father is. Whether he chooses to be part of her life is up to him, but I won't erase her paternity for your comfort or his reputation." Patricia's facade cracked slightly. "You don't understand what you're refusing. That money could change your life." "My life is already changed," Caroline said. "I have a good job, a safe home, and people who respect me. I don't need Montgomery money, and more importantly, my daughter doesn't need a family that's ashamed of her. She deserves better. She deserves to be proud of who she is, including her body, her background, her mother. And she'll never learn that from people who see her existence as something to be hidden or paid off. Patricia left angry and empty-handed, but before she drove away, she turned back to Caroline and said something surprising. "You're stronger than I was. When I was young, I let James's father's family make me into someone I wasn't. I lost myself trying to be acceptable. Don't do that. Don't let anyone make you smaller." It was the closest thing to an apology or respect Caroline would ever get from a Montgomery, and it was enough. A major milestone came when Caroline was 7 months pregnant. Elena hosted a dinner party. Nothing huge, just 20 or so people from their circle of ranchers and horse industry professionals. And she introduced Caroline not as my employee, but as my friend and colleague, Caroline Brooks, one of the finest horsewomen in Montana. People asked Caroline's advice about their own horses. They asked about her pregnancy with genuine interest and kindness. They treated her like an equal, a professional, a person of value. At one point, Caroline excused herself to the bathroom and stood looking in the mirror, her hands on her round belly, tears streaming down her face. This was what respect felt like. This was what dignity felt like. This was what it felt like to be seen fully and valued anyway, not despite her body, not despite her background, but as a whole person whose worth wasn't determined by her size or her bank account. She'd spent 38 years not knowing this was possible, but now she did, and she would never accept less again. The person Caroline became, the person she needed when she was suffering, emerged fully as she entered her 3rd trimester. She started mentoring young women who worked in ranching, particularly those who didn't fit the traditional mold. She made it a point to hire plus-size women when Elena needed extra help, knowing how hard it was for them to find work in this industry. She spoke up when she heard body-shaming comments, when she saw discrimination, when she witnessed injustice. She'd been silent for so long, accepting cruelty as normal. But now she used her voice as a shield for others, the way she wished someone had shielded her. She became known around Sweetgrass County and beyond as someone who didn't tolerate bullshit, who stood up for the underdog, who fought for dignity and respect for all women, regardless of size. Her blog readership grew to thousands. She was invited to speak at a ranching conference about diversity in agriculture. She'd transformed her pain into purpose, her shame into strength, and in doing so, she'd become exactly the kind of woman her mother had believed she could be. The moment of ultimate victory came not with fanfare, but with quiet, powerful dignity. Caroline gave birth to a healthy baby girl in late autumn, surrounded by Eleanor, Martha, and Daniel. She named her daughter Sophie Grace. Sophie because it meant wisdom. Grace because Caroline had learned that grace wasn't about being small and quiet, but about standing firm in your truth with compassion. Sophie was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a shock of dark hair, and lungs that could wake the whole county. When the nurse placed Sophie in Caroline's arms, Caroline looked at her daughter and made a promise. "You will never be taught to be small. You will never be taught that your body is wrong. You will grow up knowing that you are perfect exactly as you are, and anyone who can't see that isn't worthy of your time." It was a promise Caroline intended to keep for the rest of her life. James's final appearance in the story came 2 weeks after Sophie's birth. He showed up at the ranch unannounced, carrying an expensive stuffed animal and looking haggard. "I'd like to meet her," he said quietly. "If that's okay." Caroline debated sending him away. He'd earned no rights to this child, no access to this joy. But she thought about Sophie growing up, maybe asking someday why her father wasn't around. And she thought about being able to honestly say, "I gave him the chance. He chose not to take it." So she let him in, held Sophie in her arms, and watched as James looked at his daughter for the first time. She saw something crack in his expression, regret maybe, or recognition of everything he'd thrown away. "She's beautiful," James whispered. "She has your eyes." "Yes," Caroline said. She does. James reached out as if to touch Sophie, but Caroline pulled back slightly. You can't be in her life part-time, James. You can't show up when it's convenient and disappear when it's hard. So you need to decide right now. Are you all in or are you out? Caroline offered grace, but on her terms, not his. If you want to be Sophie's father, really be her father, here's what that means. You will show up to doctor's appointments. You will change diapers and handle 3 a.m. feedings when you have custody. You will introduce her to your family and friends as your daughter with no shame and no hesitation. You will stand up for her if anyone says a cruel word about her or her mother. You will teach her that she's worthy of love, regardless of what her body looks like or how much money she has. And most importantly, you will apologize publicly for how you treated me, for calling me a liar, for trying to deny her. You will own your mistakes and do better going forward. Those are my terms. Take them or leave them. James stood there for a long moment, holding his daughter's tiny hand, tears streaming down his face. I don't know if I can do all that, he said honestly. I don't know if I'm strong enough to face everyone's judgment, to go against my family's expectations, to be the kind of father she deserves. Caroline nodded. At least he was being honest. Then you need to leave and think about it. Come back when you know for sure. James left, and Caroline didn't know if he'd ever return. Part of her hoped he would. Every child deserved a father who loved them. But part of her was at peace either way. Sophie would grow up knowing her worth not because of James Montgomery, but because of Caroline. Because Caroline would show her every single day what it looked like to stand tall, to demand respect, to refuse to be diminished. That was the legacy that mattered. Not James's money or name, but Caroline's strength and courage. 3 weeks later, James did come back, and he'd made a choice. He'd told his mother everything, faced her disapproval and disappointment. He'd posted a public statement on social media, acknowledging Sophie as his daughter and apologizing for his initial response. He'd signed up for parenting classes. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't everything Carolyn had hoped for, but it was a start. It was courage, finally, after months of cowardice, and Caroline decided it was enough to give him a chance. The reflection on her journey came one evening, as Caroline sat on her porch, Sophie sleeping in a bassinet beside her, watching the Montana sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and rose. She thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, invisible, silent, convinced her body was something to apologize for, settling for crumbs of affection from a man too cowardly to love her in daylight. That woman felt like a stranger now. Caroline had learned that pain could be transformative if you refused to let it make you small. She learned that standing up for yourself was terrifying but necessary. She'd learned that some people would always judge her body, but their judgment said everything about them and nothing about her worth. Most importantly, she'd learned that love, real love, the kind worth having, wasn't something you had to beg for or hide or apologize for. Real love was brave and public and chose you proudly. And if someone couldn't offer that, they didn't deserve access to your heart. Carolyn's new life was everything she'd never dared to dream. She was Elena's full partner now in managing the ranch, with profit sharing and real decision-making power. Her blog had grown into a podcast with thousands of listeners. She'd been featured in a documentary about women in agriculture. She'd helped start a mentorship program for plus-size women wanting to work in the horse industry. And personally, her relationship with Daniel had deepened into something beautiful and real. He wasn't intimidated by her strength or her past. He loved Sophie like she was his own. And he looked at Caroline's body with appreciation and desire, never once suggesting she should be different. 6 months after Sophie's birth, Daniel proposed, not with a grand gesture, but with a simple question whispered in her kitchen, "Will you build this life with me?" All of it, the messy and beautiful and everything in between. Caroline said yes, not because she needed him, but because she wanted him. There was a difference, and she knew it now. Sophie was celebrated and cherished, in ways Caroline never had been as a child. Elena became Grandma Elena, showering Sophie with love and age-appropriate wisdom. Martha was Aunt Martha, teaching Sophie to be fierce and stand up for herself. Daniel became Daddy Daniel, the father who showed up every day, who changed diapers and sang lullabies, and never once acted like parenting was beneath him. And James was Father, a more formal title that reflected his more formal role. He had custody every other weekend, attended school events when he was invited, paid child support generously. He and Caroline weren't friends, probably never would be, but they were civil co-parents who both loved their daughter. And Sophie grew up knowing she was wanted, knowing her body was perfect, knowing she could be anything she dreamed without apologizing for the space she took up. She grew up seeing her mother stand tall and strong, refusing to be diminished. That was the greatest gift Caroline could give her, not protection from the world's cruelty, but an example of how to face it with dignity. The community that Caroline had changed was evident everywhere. Sweetgrass County now had 3 ranches owned or managed by women. The local ranching association had implemented anti-discrimination policies that specifically included weight-based discrimination. 2 plus-size women had been hired as ranch hands at previously all-male operations. The county fair had eliminated Most Beautiful Cowgirl category and replaced it with Most Skilled Horsewoman. Small changes maybe, but meaningful ones. Caroline had shown that you could demand better and actually get it. She'd shown that speaking up worked, that standing tall mattered, that refusing to be treated as less than could create ripples that spread far beyond your own life. She hadn't set out to be an activist or a leader. She'd just set out to be treated with dignity. But in fighting for herself, she'd inadvertently fought for so many others too. And that felt like purpose. That felt like meaning. The moment came full circle 3 years after Sophie's birth. Montgomery Ranch was hosting its annual charity event, the same event where Caroline had once been humiliated, mocked, told she looked like an escaped farm animal. But this year, Caroline received an invitation, not to work, to attend as a guest. Eleanor had been invited and insisted Caroline come with her, along with Daniel and Sophie. Caroline almost declined. The idea of returning to that place, to those people, made her stomach churn with remembered shame. But then she thought, why should I hide? Why should I give them that power? So she went. She wore a stunning emerald dress that fit her curves perfectly, her hair styled, her head high. She walked into that garden party holding Daniel's hand, with Sophie in her arms, and she didn't apologize for 1 single inch of space she took up. She saw James across the lawn, looking uncomfortable and alone despite being surrounded by people. She saw several of the women who'd mocked her 3 years ago, looking at her now with surprise and something that might have been respect. And Caroline realized she'd won, not because she'd lost weight or changed who she was or become acceptable to these people. She'd won because she'd stopped needing their acceptance. The inspiration Caroline provided to others became clear when a young woman approached her at the garden party. She was maybe 19, plus size, working as a server. "Miss Brooks," she said shyly, "I read your blog, I listened to your podcast, and I just wanted to say thank you. I'm starting veterinary school in the fall because of you, because you made me believe I could work with animals, even though I don't look like the women in the textbooks." Caroline hugged her, this stranger who'd become brave because Caroline had been brave first. That moment, more than the job, the house, the relationship, the redemption, that was the real victory. She'd changed someone's life simply by refusing to accept that her body made her less worthy. She'd shown this young woman that the world's cruelty didn't have to become your truth. You could fight back. You could stand tall. You could build a beautiful life on your own terms. And that ripple effect, that was everything. That was legacy. That was what made all the pain and heartbreak and struggle worthwhile. Her new dream and mission crystallized in that moment. Caroline decided to expand her work beyond blogging and podcasting. She started a non-profit called Big Love, Big Life, dedicated to supporting plus-size women in agriculture and other traditionally body-conscious industries. The organization provided scholarships, mentorship, job placement, and advocacy. Within a year, they'd helped 40 women start careers they'd been told weren't for them. They'd successfully lobbied for anti-discrimination policies at 5 major agricultural organizations. They'd created a network of support that meant no woman had to face what Caroline had faced alone. Caroline threw herself into this work with passion and purpose. Sophie grew up attending events, seeing her mother speak, learning that you could turn pain into power and shame into service. Daniel supported her fully, taking on more parenting duties when Caroline traveled for speaking engagements. Elena provided funding and connections. Even James contributed, perhaps trying to atone for his past failures by supporting Caroline's future triumphs. The work was exhausting and exhilarating, frustrating and fulfilling. It was everything Caroline had been made for. Caroline Brooks's story wasn't about weight loss or revenge or even justice, really. It was about reclamation, reclaiming her voice, her worth, her right to take up space in a world that constantly told her to shrink. She'd been humiliated, betrayed, and dismissed by a man who'd claimed to love her, but was too ashamed to be seen with her. But that breaking point became her turning point. She'd learned that love without courage isn't love at all. She'd learned that your body isn't something that needs to be fixed before you deserve dignity. She'd learned that standing tall when the world wants you small is the most radical and powerful thing you can do. And most importantly, she'd learned that your story doesn't end when someone else tries to write your ending. You get to keep writing. You get to choose how it turns out. If Caroline's story resonated with you, if you've ever been made to feel like your body makes you less worthy of love, respect, or space in this world, please know this: you are enough, right now, exactly as you are. Your body is not your limitation. Your weight does not determine your worth, and anyone who can't see your value isn't worthy of your time. You deserve to be loved loudly and proudly, to be claimed, not hidden, to take up all the space you need without apology. Don't settle for people who want to enjoy you in darkness but deny you in light. Demand better, stand taller, build the big, beautiful life you were made for. Your story is still being written, and only you hold the pen. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you feel less alone, leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Have you experienced something similar? Are you fighting to stand tall in a world that wants you small? I'd love to hear your story. And if you believe that every woman deserves dignity regardless of size, hit that subscribe button. This channel is dedicated to stories of women who refuse to be diminished, who transform shame into strength, and who prove that courage looks like standing firm in your truth. Thank you for listening to Caroline's story. I'll see you in the next one, where we'll meet another woman who chose to rise rather than shrink.